The morning started quietly at Riverside Arts Academy. But inside the main music classroom, something tense was already building. The wooden piano sat in the center like a king, polished, shining, and waiting silently for its next victim. Students whispered loudly, excited because today was the surprise piano test that everyone feared. Most of them practiced all week. Some even stayed late after school just to impress the music professor. But one person did not practice at all, and that was Ethan. The quiet boy who sat near the window and solved math puzzles when everyone else played music. He was not a music student. He was from the math department. But due to a scheduling error, he had been placed in this music class for the semester. Everyone thought he would drop out after the first week, but somehow he stayed, sitting silently with his notebooks filled with numbers and equations instead of musical notes. The professor, Ms. Rowan, a strict woman with sharp eyes and a habit of tapping her pen when upset, noticed him every day but never understood why he was in her class. She believed he did not belong there. And today she planned to finally prove it when the bell rang. She entered the room with her usual confident steps, her heels clicking loudly on the floor like a warning. She looked at all the students. Then she looked straight at Ethan and said his name firmly. Everyone turned in his direction, shocked, because no one expected the professor to pick the quiet math boy first. Ethan stood up slowly, his hands cold, his heart beating fast. Because he knew he had never touched a piano in his life, except during the first week when he pressed a few random keys for fun. Ms. Rowan guided him to the center where the piano waited, and the whole class watched with a mix of curiosity and amusement. Some students whispered that this was going to be funny. Others said he would embarrass himself and leave the class forever. Ethan sat down on the bench and looked at the long row of black and white keys, feeling like he was staring at a long and difficult exam. M's. Rowan lifted her chin and said she would play a tune first. Then he would copy it exactly. Ethan nodded nervously. But what he did not know was that she had no intention of helping him. She wanted to test him in a way she thought he would surely fail. She played a twisted, messy, completely wrong melody, filled with clashing notes and broken rhythm. Something no student could memorize easily. She chose this tune on purpose, to expose him as someone who did not belong in her music class. The tune echoed around the room like a confusing puzzle, sharp and uneven, making some students cringe. When she finished, she closed the piano lid halfway and looked at Ethan with a small smirk. Waiting to see him panic, the class became silent, so silent that even the ticking of the clock felt loud. Ethan took a slow breath, his fingers shaking as he touched the keys. He replayed the melody inside his mind, but he did not hear it the way normal music students did. Where others heard chaos, he saw patterns, shapes, numbers, sequences and formulas. The wrong notes did not confuse him. They formed a map in his head like a strange mathematical puzzle waiting to be solved. To him, each sound had a value. Each beat had a pattern. Each mistake had a reason. He pressed the first key gently, matching the sound he remembered. Then the second key, then the third, building the tune slowly but with sharp focus. Students leaned forward, expecting him to fail. But their smiles faded as the tune started sounding clearer than what the professor played. Instead of repeating the wrong tune exactly, Ethan's mind corrected the errors automatically and turned the messy melody into something smoother and more logical. A few students exchanged confused looks, wondering how a math student could fix music without knowing music theory. Ms. Rowan's smirk disappeared, replaced by a tightening jaw and raised eyebrows. She stepped closer to the piano as Ethan continued playing, each note cleaner than the last, each rhythm more balanced. He finished the melody softly, and the room stayed silent for several long seconds. Nobody laughed, nobody whispered, nobody even breathed loudly. They all watched Ethan, the quiet boy who was supposed to embarrass himself, sitting calmly with his fingers still resting on the piano keys. Ms. Rowan tried to hide her surprise, but her eyes betrayed her, shining with disbelief and something close to fear. She realized he did not simply memorize the tune. He understood it, analyzed it, and fixed it. And this was just the beginning. Ethan looked up with worried eyes, thinking he must have done something wrong, because the room felt strange, too quiet, too heavy. But little did he know the truth. He had just shocked the entire classroom, including the professor. And this moment was about to change his entire life. Ethan sat frozen on the piano bench, still unsure if he had done something good or something terribly wrong. The room was so quiet that he could hear a pencil fall somewhere behind him. He looked around and noticed every pair of eyes locked on him, but not with laughter like before. Instead, with confusion, surprise, and something else he could not understand. Ms. Rowan, the strict music professor who always looked confident, stood with one hand on the piano lid, staring at him as if she were seeing a ghost. She cleared her throat and told him to stay where he was, her voice sounding different now, not sharp, but careful, almost nervous. Then she went back to her table, picked up another sheet of music, and returned to him with quick steps like someone trying to solve a mystery. She placed the sheet in front of him and tapped the top line with her finger. Asking him to play it, Ethan leaned closer, but the notes meant nothing to him. They looked like strange symbols scattered across lines. He whispered that he did not know how to read music. And the class gasped loudly because no one expected such honesty. Ms. Rowan narrowed her eyes and asked how he had played the previous tune if he could not read notes. Ethan shrugged shyly and said he simply followed the sound in his head, breaking it into patterns, fixing the wrong parts automatically because they did not fit the shape. His explanation confused everyone even more. But Ms. Rowan did not give up. Something inside her was pushing her to understand what she was witnessing. She sat beside him again and played another melody, this time one that was much more complex, filled with fast jumps and odd chords that even good students struggled with. She purposely added mistakes again, mismatched chords, and incorrect timing, watching him closely while she played. When she finished, she crossed her arms and waited. Expecting him to be overwhelmed, Ethan replayed the sound inside his mind. But again, he did not hear it as music. He heard it as a puzzle made of numbers, angles, shapes, ups, downs, and repeated ratios. His fingers trembled. But he pressed the keys slowly and carefully, matching each part of the puzzle exactly how his mind arranged it. He paused only to fix the broken rhythm, smoothing the melody until it finally flowed correctly. The classroom grew even quieter, as if every person inside the room stopped breathing at the same time halfway through. A boy in the back whispered, "No way," but even his voice sounded scared. Ethan continued playing, unaware that his version of the tune was not only correct, but also more beautiful, more balanced, and more emotionally smooth than the one the professor intended. When he struck the final note, the sound hung in the air like a glowing thread of light stretching across the room. The students stared at each other, stunned, and even Ms. Rowan looked like she had forgotten how to blink. She stepped close again, but this time her voice came out soft, almost trembling, as she asked him how he did that. Ethan answered honestly, explaining that the music looked wrong in his mind, like an equation with a mistake, so he fixed it the way he fixed math problems. He said he could see the notes floating inside his head, turning into shapes and numbers that told him where to go next. The professor swallowed hard, realizing she was not dealing with a normal student. She was looking at a mind she could not understand, a mind that might be operating on a level beyond normal musical training. She had spent 30 years teaching, guiding students, correcting mistakes, but she had never seen this, never even imagined something like this, to test him further. She clapped a random rhythm on the desk behind him, fast and uneven, like someone throwing stones into water. Without turning around, Ethan copied the rhythm on the piano immediately. Matching the speed and spacing perfectly, students gasped again. And one girl whispered that he might not be human. Ms. Rowan walked in a slow circle, pressing her fingers against her forehead, trying to figure out what she had discovered by accident. She had given him the wrong tune to embarrass him, to make him quit, to prove he did not belong. But instead, she found something extraordinary, and she wasn't ready for what it meant. She sat on the chair in front of the class and asked Ethan one more question, one that would decide everything. She asked him to create a small tune of his own, anything he felt inside his mind. Anything he could build using the shapes and numbers he always talked about. Ethan hesitated, his hands shaking slightly. But then he closed his eyes and let the patterns form inside him. He started pressing the keys softly, slowly, then a little faster, following an invisible path only he could see. The melody he created was simple at first, like gentle drops of rain landing on a window. But then it grew, became deeper, richer, more emotional, like a story with no words. Like a dream turning into sunlight when he finished.
When he finished, the entire class sat frozen, unable to speak because something magical had just happened right in front of them. Ms. Rowan covered her mouth with her hand, tears gathering in her eyes because she finally understood. Ethan was not copying music, he was seeing it, shaping it, solving it, transforming it. He was not just good, he was unique, gifted, and completely unaware of how rare his talent truly was. And from that moment, the entire class saw him differently. But the one who changed the most was Mrs. Rowan. For the first time in many years, she felt humbled, amazed, and shaken. She realized she had just witnessed the beginning of something incredible. A boy who used math to fix music. A boy who had a gift no one else had. And she knew this was only the start. Ethan sat on the piano bench, feeling small and confused, completely unaware of how deeply he had shaken the room. Students still stared at him like they were trying to understand if he had hidden powers or some strange secret. But Ethan did not feel powerful at all. He felt embarrassed, worried he had broken a rule or changed the tune too much. He quietly pulled his hands away from the keys, placing them on his lap as if he had done something wrong. Ms. Rowan stepped forward slowly, her heels silent now, as if she was walking on clouds instead of a wooden floor. Her face no longer carried the strict expression everyone feared. Instead, it showed something rare in her, a look of disbelief mixed with curiosity and respect. She asked Ethan to stand, and he did so nervously. Not sure what would happen next, the professor walked around him, studying him the way a scientist studies a rare object found in the wild. She finally stopped in front of him and asked him a question she had never asked any student before. "Ethan, do you understand what you just did?" She said softly. Ethan swallowed hard and shook his head because he honestly did not know. To him, he had simply corrected something that looked wrong inside his mind. Just like correcting a math problem that had an extra number or missing symbol. Ms. Rowan turned to the class and asked if anyone could play the tune the way she had originally played it. With all the mistakes, a few brave students tried. But none of them could remember the wrong version clearly, and none could make sense of the broken chords. It sounded ugly, messy, and painful every time they attempted it. Then she asked Ethan to play it again, but exactly how she had played it wrong and twisted. Ethan sat down again, placed his fingers on the keys, and froze. He hesitated, then whispered that he could not do it, because the tune didn't fit. The professor's eyebrows rose, and she leaned forward, asking him what he meant. Ethan explained that when she played the wrong version, the notes did not connect properly. The shapes inside his mind did not match, the pattern was broken, and the melody felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. He said he could only fix it, not repeat it wrong, because repeating something broken made his mind feel itchy. Several students burst into quiet gasps. and one boy dropped his pen in shock. Rowan took a seat on the front row chair, staring at Ethan without blinking. Never in her 30 years of teaching had she met a student who could not copy mistakes, because his mind repaired them automatically. She took a deep breath and asked him to close his eyes. She then tapped random notes in quick, confusing order, mixing high and low keys, creating a sound that had no rhythm and no pattern at all. The students frowned, some covering their ears because it sounded like chaos, like noise with no purpose, but Ethan listened with unusual focus, his head tilting slightly as if he were catching something the others could not hear. When she stopped, she told him to play exactly what she had played. Ethan took a deep breath and began pressing the keys. But once again, the result was different. Instead of chaos, he produced a structured, smooth, logical version of the sound she had created. He unknowingly turned noise into harmony, broken sound into a complete melody. Ms. Rowan's hands slowly covered her mouth as she watched him. Her eyes wide with awe, the students leaned forward, completely mesmerized because this was beyond talent, beyond luck, beyond anything they understood. Ethan finished, looked up, and asked quietly if he did it wrong again. Ms. Rowan shook her head slowly, too stunned to speak for a moment. She finally said, "No, Ethan, you didn't do it wrong. You did something impossible." He blinked, confused, because he never thought what he did was special. He thought everyone processed sound through patterns and numbers the way he did. The professor stood suddenly and walked to the window, trying to hide her trembling hands. She looked outside for a moment, gathering herself, then turned back to the class with a serious expression. She told them that what they had witnessed was not normal musical talent. It was something far beyond that. She said Ethan had a rare way of hearing, something she had only read about in old scientific research papers. Some people called it auditory synesthesia, where the brain converts sound into color or shape or movement. But Ethan's version was different. He converted sound into mathematical structure automatically. He was solving music like equations, breaking every tune into patterns, ratios, and geometric shapes inside his mind. Ethan listened quietly, shocked because he never knew there was a name for what he felt. He never knew it was unusual or special. It was simply how his mind worked. The class looked at him differently now, not with teasing or confusion, but with quiet respect, wonder, and a bit of fear. Ms. Rowan walked back to the piano slowly and placed her hand gently on the lid. She said that she had misjudged him, underestimated him, and even tried to test him unfairly. And yet he had shown her something she had never seen in her entire career. She told him he was gifted, but not in the normal way people think about gifts. He was gifted in a way that made no sense, a way that science barely understood, a way that could change everything he thought he knew about himself. Ethan felt his face grow warm, his heart beating faster because this was the first time someone acknowledged his strange way of seeing the world without mocking him. Ms. Rowan looked into his eyes with a new softness, and she knew something with absolute certainty. This boy was not just a math genius, not just a hidden musician. He was something rare, something extraordinary, something the world would one day talk about. And part 3 ended with every person in that classroom realizing that nothing about Ethan was simple, ordinary, or accidental. He had a gift that turned mistakes into music, chaos into order, and silence into beauty. And this was only the beginning of what he could do. Ethan sat back down on the piano bench, still feeling the weight of the classroom's eyes on him. But something inside him felt different now, a strange warmth, a strange awareness, like he had stepped into a world he never knew existed. His fingers rested lightly on the keys, but he didn't press any of them. He just listened to the silence. And yet even the silence had shapes, patterns, and quiet rhythms only he could sense. The classroom remained still, and nobody dared to whisper anymore. Not after what they had just witnessed. Ms. Rowan walked toward him slowly. Her steps soft and careful, like she was approaching something fragile and precious at the same time. Her usual stern face was gone, replaced by a look of awe and deep curiosity. She stopped right beside him, folded her arms gently, and asked him if he always heard music this way. Ethan hesitated, unsure how to explain something he had lived with his whole life. He whispered that he did not hear music the way others did. He saw shapes, numbers, lines, and patterns that told him where the notes should go. He said he assumed everyone else heard music the same way. The class exchanged shocked looks, because none of them could imagine seeing music instead of hearing it. Ms. Rowan took a long breath, her mind racing, understanding more and more with each word Ethan spoke. She nodded slowly, telling him that what he had was extremely rare, something even trained musicians couldn't learn. She explained that most people needed years of practice to understand harmony, rhythm, and composition. But Ethan had done it naturally, effortlessly, without even knowing the rules he was following. She told him he was like someone who had never studied mathematics, but could still solve equations faster than a calculator. Ethan looked down, unsure how to react to being compared to something so extraordinary. He had always felt strange and different, but he never realized his difference was a kind of brilliance. Ms. Rowan then asked him to move aside gently, and she took the piano bench herself. The entire class leaned forward in curiosity as she played a simple classical melody, something soft, smooth, and gentle. When she finished, she asked Ethan to sit again and improve the melody using whatever he felt inside his mind. Ethan's heart thumped loudly in his chest. This was different from correcting mistakes. This was creating something new from something already beautiful. He placed his fingers on the keys again, feeling the pattern of the melody float inside his mind. Twisting, expanding, reshaping, he breathed slowly, letting the shapes guide him, letting the patterns decide where to go next. Then he played. The melody he created was like a bright river flowing through a quiet forest. Smooth, glowing, soft but full of depth and emotion. Every note landed perfectly. Every transition flowed like water. Every change felt natural and warm. The students sat frozen, unable to move, unable to blink, as if the music had wrapped around their hearts and glued them to their seats, even Mums. Rowan stared with her hand on her chest, her breathing shallow, her eyes glistening. She had taught hundreds of students, seen thousands of performances, but none of them had ever made her feel this way. Ethan finished the tune with a soft final note that lingered in the air like a warm, fading sunset. There was silence after that. A long, heavy silence, the kind that fills a room after something sacred has just happened. Ms. Rowan sat beside Ethan slowly, her eyes still watery, her voice trembling slightly. She told him that he had just turned a simple melody into something profound, something alive, something that could make strangers cry without knowing why. She said that musicians train for decades to do what he had done in a few minutes. Ethan blinked in confusion, unsure how something that felt natural to him could feel magical to others. He asked quietly if he had changed the melody too much or ruined it. The class reacted instantly, shaking their heads, whispering, "No," and some even smiling in disbelief. Ms. Rowan placed a hand on his shoulder gently, something she had never done with any student before. She told him that what he had was not just talent, but a gift that the world rarely sees. A gift that could open doors he never dreamed of. A gift that could change his future. Ethan felt his throat tighten as he realized he was hearing something he had never heard before, praise for something he always thought made him odd. He had been mocked before for liking numbers too much, for being different, for thinking in strange ways. But here, in this room, his difference finally made sense. His strangeness finally had purpose. Ms. Rowan turned to the class and announced that from this day onward, Ethan would receive special training, extra guidance. and all the support he needed to explore his ability. The students didn't argue, they didn't complain, how could they? After seeing what he could do, Ethan felt a spark inside him, small but bright, like a new star forming quietly in the dark. He didn't know where this new journey would lead him. He didn't know if he was ready, but for the first time in his life, he felt proud of the way his mind worked, proud of the way he saw the world. And as part 4 ended, Ethan's life began to shift. The boy who thought he belonged nowhere was slowly discovering that he might belong everywhere, especially in a world made of music, numbers, and patterns only he could see. Ethan walked out of the classroom that day, feeling lighter than he had in years, but also more confused. He kept repeating Ms. Rowan's words in his mind, words he never expected to hear. Words that sounded too big for him. "You have a gift," she had said. A gift the world rarely sees. He hugged his backpack close to his chest as he walked down the hallway, feeling the shapes and patterns of the day still swirling inside his mind. Students who had laughed at him before now looked at him with curiosity, respect, and even a little fear. Some whispered his name as he passed, others simply stared, trying to understand how the quiet math student suddenly became the center of attention. Ethan didn't know how to handle any of it. He just wanted to go home, sit at his small desk, and solve a simple puzzle to calm his mind. But fate had other plans for him that day. As he stepped outside, he found Ms. Rowan standing near the school garden, waiting for him. She had never waited for any student before, not even the best musicians. When she saw him, she motioned him over with a soft smile and asked if he could spare a few minutes. Ethan nodded quietly, feeling nervous again, wondering if he had done something wrong after all. But her expression didn't look angry, it looked thoughtful and almost gentle. She guided him to a wooden bench near the roses and sat beside him. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She just looked at the flowers like she was searching for the right words. Then she finally said that she wanted to give him a real test, a challenging one. Something difficult enough to see the full extent of his ability. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken, his fingers tapping nervously against his knee. She explained that she wanted to take him to the school's grand concert hall, a place usually reserved for final performances and rehearsals of advanced students. Ethan blinked in shock, unable to imagine himself inside a hall built for talented musicians. But Ms. Rowan insisted, saying that the piano inside that hall was different. Larger, richer, more responsive. She believed it could reveal more of Ethan's abilities, more of the hidden patterns inside his mind. Ethan followed her through the school building, his steps small and cautious. As they reached the large double doors of the concert hall, he felt his breath catch in his throat. The room was enormous, filled with dozens of empty seats, glowing golden lights, and a stage that looked too big for someone like him. At the center of the stage stood a grand piano, shining like a black mirror, tall, elegant, almost intimidating. Ethan had never seen anything like it. Ms. Rowan told him to sit, her voice softer than ever. He approached the piano with trembling hands and took his place on the wide bench. The keys felt different here, smoother, heavier, like they carried memories of every musician who had touched them before. Ms. Rowan opened a folder and pulled out a sheet of advanced musical notes, the hardest piece she had ever taught. She placed it gently on the stand and stepped back, crossing her arms as she watched him with silent expectation. Ethan stared at the sheet, but the symbols and lines meant nothing to him. They looked like a foreign language written in ink. He whispered that he couldn't read it, but Ms. Rowan told him she didn't expect him to. She asked him to listen carefully instead. Then she played the entire piece herself, her fingers dancing across the keys with a level of skill that left Ethan breathless. The music was powerful, rising and falling like waves crashing against cliffs, full of emotion, depth, and energy. But there was something strange too. Something hidden between the notes, something broken, as Rowan had played it intentionally with 3 mistakes, small ones, but enough to disrupt the flow. Ethan listened with wide eyes, his mind filling with shapes, angles, patterns that flashed like lights inside a dark room. When she finished, she stepped aside and told him to play it back. Ethan closed his eyes and let the shapes settle into place. Then he began to play. At first, he was slow, finding the rhythm, feeling the structure, but soon his fingers moved with surprising confidence. He corrected the mistakes automatically and reshaped the melody, adding smooth transitions and emotional depth he didn't even know he was capable of. The hall filled with a version of the piece that was not only accurate, but more complete, more connected, more meaningful. Ms. Rowan stood frozen, her eyes growing glassy. She had played this piece for years, but she had never heard it like this, never felt it this deeply. Ethan ended the last note with a gentle push, letting it echo softly through the hall. He sat still afterward, unsure if he had failed or succeeded. Ms. Rowan wiped her eyes quietly, stunned beyond words. She told him he wasn't just a student with talent, he was something far rarer. Someone who understood music on a level she couldn't teach. For the first time in her life, she felt small in the presence of a student. She placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered that the world needed to hear him. But Ethan didn't feel ready for the world. He only knew one thing: his life had changed forever. And now there was no turning back. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a strange heaviness in his chest, a mix of nervousness, excitement, and fear he had never felt before. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at his hands, wondering how something as simple as fingers could create music that made grown adults cry. For most of his life, those same hands only solved math problems, wrote equations, and held pencils until the paper ripped. He never imagined they could do anything else. But now everything felt different, like his world had expanded overnight. He gathered his school bag and walked to the academy with slow steps, his thoughts spinning in quiet circles inside his mind. When he reached the hallway, whispers rushed toward him like a soft wind. Students pointed at him, not with mockery this time, but with amazement and curiosity. Some of them smiled at him. Others stared with wide eyes as if he were a mystery they wanted to solve. Ethan felt shy, almost overwhelmed, and he kept his head down as he made his way to class. But the biggest surprise waited for him when he entered the music room. Standing beside the piano was the school principal, a tall man with gray hair, sharp glasses, and a serious expression usually reserved for important ceremonies. Beside him stood Ms. Rowan, her hands clasped together, her face full of a strange mix of pride and disbelief. When they saw Ethan, they both turned toward him. The principal stepped forward and introduced himself formally, but his tone carried warmth instead of intimidation. He told Ethan that a video recorded by one of the students yesterday had spread around the school overnight. A video of Ethan correcting the melody without any training, and performing a difficult piece with impossible accuracy. Ethan felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. He had no idea someone had recorded him. The principal said teachers from different departments had seen the video, including the head of the arts division and even some people outside the academy. Ethan's stomach tightened as he realized how fast things were spreading. The principal explained that he had arranged a private meeting with the academy's special talent board, a group of experts who evaluate, and told him he belonged there more than anyone she had ever taught. She then invited him to sit at the piano again because the principal wanted to see with his own eyes what everyone was talking about. Ethan hesitated, but he sat down, his fingers brushing against the familiar keys. Ms. Rowan told him to listen to a new melody, something she had prepared specifically for this test. She played it slowly, beautifully, but deliberately included 2 wrong chords. The principal watched carefully, folding his arms, studying Ethan like an important discovery. When she finished, she nodded at Ethan, giving him silent permission to begin. He took a deep breath and let the shapes and patterns form again inside his mind. Then he played, correcting the mistakes instinctively, smoothing the rhythm, and creating a version that carried warmth and clarity like sunlight, filling a quiet room. The principal's eyebrows lifted slightly, an expression of genuine shock spreading across his face. Ethan continued for a few more minutes, completely absorbed, unaware of how deeply he was affecting the adults watching him. When he finished, the room remained still for several seconds. The principal finally spoke, his voice unusually soft, saying he had never seen raw talent like this in his entire career. He said Ethan didn't just play music, he restructured it, reinvented it, made it whole in a way trained musicians couldn't. Rowan nodded in agreement, her eyes shining with emotion. Ethan sat quietly, unsure how to react to such praise, unsure if he deserved any of it. The principal then asked him a surprising question, whether he would be willing to perform something small at the upcoming school exhibition. Ethan froze. A performance, on stage, in front of hundreds of people, felt like a mountain he couldn't climb. He whispered that he didn't think he was ready, that he didn't understand music the way normal musicians did. But Ms. Rowan knelt beside him and told him he didn't need to understand it the way others did. She said that his way was different, unique, and special. The principal agreed, saying the world always celebrated people who surprised them, who saw things differently, who brought newness into old art. Ethan felt his heartbeat thumping loudly, anxiety twisting inside him. But he also felt something else, something warm and hopeful, a feeling he had never felt before, the feeling of being valued, being seen, being understood. He looked at Miss Rowan, then at the principal, and finally nodded shyly. He said he would try, and Miss Rowan smiled, proud and relieved. The principal shook his hand firmly, telling him they would prepare him for everything he needed, and Ethan walked out of the music room that day with a quiet flame inside him, a flame of possibility, a flame of courage, a flame that whispered that maybe, just maybe, his strange way of seeing the world was not a burden at all, but a gift meant to shine. The days leading up to the school exhibition passed like a whirlwind for Ethan, and each day felt heavier than the last. He had never been the center of attention before, never been the reason students whispered in hallways or teachers paused to smile as he walked by. He tried to stay calm, but every hallway felt like a stage. Every stair felt like a spotlight shining straight through him. Even during math class, his safe place, he couldn't focus properly. The shapes and patterns of numbers kept mixing with music patterns inside his mind. It was like two worlds were colliding quietly in his head, and he didn't know how to separate them anymore. Miss Rowan met him every afternoon in the grand concert hall for practice, gently guiding him without forcing anything. She never told him what to play. She only told him to feel the shapes, follow the pattern, or let the sound settle. And each time he touched the piano, something new happened, something extraordinary. Some days he played gentle pieces that made Ms. Rowan close her eyes and breathe slowly. Other days he played bold, powerful tunes that echoed across the hall like thunder mixed with sunlight. But the most surprising moment came on a quiet afternoon, when he walked into the hall and found Ms. Rowan waiting for him with a strange expression. Her eyes looked red, like she had cried, but she still carried a warm smile. She told him she needed to talk to him, and Ethan felt his stomach twist, afraid she would say he wasn't ready for the performance. Instead, she told him something completely different, something shocking. She admitted that the first day she saw him, she assumed he was in the wrong class, a mistake, a student who would fall behind and eventually quit. She confessed she played the wrong tune on purpose to embarrass him, because she believed he didn't belong in music at all. Ethan's heart tightened, his chest feeling heavy as he listened. He had always felt like an outsider, but hearing it from her made it hurt in a sharp, surprising way. Ms. Rowan stepped closer, her voice trembling slightly as she said she was wrong. Completely wrong. She told him that he had changed the way she saw her own teaching, changed the way she understood music, changed the way she understood talent. She said she had never in her life met someone like him, someone who fixed mistakes by instinct, Someone who saw music through mathematics and emotion at the same time. Ethan swallowed hard, unsure what to say, because her honesty felt heavy but warm, painful but healing. Miss Rowan then bowed her head slightly, a gesture Ethan never expected from her. She apologized, sincerely, deeply, telling him she wished she could take back that first test. But she was grateful he revealed something extraordinary that day. Ethan's eyes softened, and he whispered that he wasn't angry. He said he didn't understand music back then. He was just trying his best not to disappoint anyone. Ms. Rowan smiled, wiping the corner of her eye as she realized how pure and gentle his heart truly was. She placed her hand on his shoulder and told him that the exhibition wasn't just a performance anymore. It was his moment. A moment to show the world something new, something rare, something that didn't need rules or years of practice to exist. She asked him what he wanted to play on stage, and Ethan looked down at his hands thoughtfully. He said he wanted to play something that felt natural, something that came from inside his mind, not from a sheet of paper. Ms. Rowan nodded, telling him that was exactly what the exhibition needed. Something honest, something pure, something only he could create. So they practiced less and talked more that day. Ethan explained how he saw each sound as a shape, how every chord had a color, how rhythm looked like moving lines inside his mind. Ms. Rowan listened with fascination, understanding him more deeply than ever before. By the time they finished, the sun had set, casting golden light across the empty hall. As Ethan packed his bag to leave, Ms. Rowan stopped him suddenly. She looked at him with eyes full of pride and said the words he never expected to hear from a teacher like her. "You're ready," she whispered. "More ready than you think." Ethan's heart trembled, balancing between fear and excitement. He walked home under the evening sky, hearing soft melodies forming in his mind like glowing threads weaving themselves into something beautiful. For the first time, he wasn't scared of those sounds. He wasn't confused by them. He welcomed them. He let them guide him. And as he neared his house, the melody growing stronger inside him, he realized something powerful. The exhibition wasn't just going to reveal his hidden ability to the world. It was going to reveal him, the real him, the boy who saw patterns in noise, the boy who fixed broken tunes, the boy whose mind created music without rules. Part 7 ended with Ethan standing outside his home, looking at his hands again. But this time, he didn't see hands meant for math problems only. He saw hands that could rewrite music itself. And tomorrow, the world would hear them. The night of the exhibition arrived faster than Ethan expected. And as he stood backstage, he felt like the entire world was pressing on his shoulders. The hall was filled with students, teachers, parents, and visitors from outside the academy, all waiting quietly, all curious to see the boy everyone had been whispering about for days. The soft glow of the stage lights shone through the curtains, and Ethan could see the silhouettes of people shifting in their seats. He clutched his hands tightly, his fingers trembling, his heart beating faster than it ever had in his life. For a moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake, if he should have said no, if he was too small for something this big. He heard laughter from the crowd, chatter, camera clicks, but none of it felt real to him. Then he heard footsteps approaching from behind, soft and familiar. Ms. Rowan stood beside him, her smile calm but full of pride, her eyes warm with belief, not pressure. She told him that everything he needed was already inside him, that he didn't have to impress anyone. He only had to be himself. She reminded him that he wasn't performing to prove he belonged here. He was performing to show the world his way of hearing, seeing, and shaping music. Her voice was steady, like an anchor pulling him back from his fear. Ethan breathed deeply, nodding slowly as he whispered that he would try his best. When the host announced his name, the audience fell into a gentle silence. Ethan stepped onto the stage with small, hesitant steps. His eyes lowered as he walked toward the grand piano that stood in the center like a quiet giant. The lights felt warm on his skin, bright but comforting in a strange way. He sat down, placed his hands on the keys, and for a moment, everything around him faded. He no longer heard the audience, the whispers, the breathing, or the shifting seats. He only heard the melody that had been forming inside him for days. A melody born from patterns, from shapes, from numbers and emotions woven together like threads of light. He closed his eyes, and the hall filled with a peaceful hush. Then he played. The first notes were soft, delicate, like the sound of morning light touching a quiet window. People leaned forward instinctively. Drawn in without realizing it, the melody grew slowly, weaving itself like a story told without words. Ethan played each note with gentle intention, letting the patterns guide him the way stars guide ships in the dark. Shapes danced in his mind, lines curved and twisted. Colors pulsed in quiet harmony, and through all of it, he followed them, trusting them, letting them lead him deeper and deeper into the heart of the music he had created. Ms. Rowan watched from backstage, tears gathering in her eyes as she realized she wasn't just listening to a performance. She was witnessing a transformation. The shy math boy she once doubted was gone, replaced by someone who shaped sound like an artist shapes paint, someone who brought order to chaos without even trying. The music rose higher, deeper, brighter, filling every corner of the hall. Parents who didn't understand music wiped their eyes without knowing why. Students who teased Ethan before now stared with open mouths, unable to believe the quiet boy they ignored could create something so powerful. Teachers from the arts department leaned forward, stunned by the emotional weight carried by each note, and the principal stood perfectly still, understanding that the academy had just discovered someone who would one day be known far beyond these walls. The final part of the melody slowed gently, becoming softer, lighter, like a peaceful sunset, descending slowly over the world. Ethan pressed the last note with trembling fingers, letting it echo through the hall like a warm goodbye. When the sound faded, silence fell, deep, thick, breathtaking silence. No one moved, no one clapped, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. The moment was too pure, too heavy, too beautiful to break so quickly. Then, as if a signal passed through the crowd, the entire hall erupted into applause. Loud, thunderous, overwhelming applause that shook the air around Ethan. People stood up, cheering, clapping, shouting his name, wiping tears from their eyes. Ms. Rowan stepped onto the stage and placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice shaking as she whispered that she had never been so proud in her life. Ethan looked up, his eyes shining with surprise and emotion, realizing something he had never understood before. He wasn't strange, he wasn't wrong, he wasn't misplaced. He was gifted, he was unique, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly seen. The applause continued, louder and louder, echoing through the hall like a storm of joy, and Ethan, the boy who once thought he was nothing special, stood in the center of the stage with tears in his eyes, knowing deep inside that this was only the beginning of his journey, a journey that would carry his patterns, his shapes, his music, and his heart into a world finally ready to hear him.